director, Rima Shahid, and the entire Women4Change for advocating for the women in the Indiana Women's Prison and their right to have access to air conditioning, access to water, and toiletry, and that falls into our environmental justice frame that energy should be a human right for everyone. So kudos to you all for leading in that work. Okay. And I want to make sure that my hope is to connect with everyone on this virtual, but realizing that that I may have gaps in visual, hearing, and language in my presentation. So please just let me know, and I'll be happy to create or make a special accommodations for anyone. And this is what I hope to go over. And as I've been timing it, Catherine, I'm at about 34 minutes. So for my 30 minutes. So I want to come to you in my own way, do some grounding and framing, speak a little about African descent, just transition, a just transition framework in general, environmental climate justice, talk about the environmental justice principles, Executive Order 12898, the Hermes principles, our work in general, and what can be done.
Great.
And the slides are just moving a little slow. So, so me coming to you in my own way, I feel like you have to have a relationship and kind of know people. So I come from many generations of activists. My mother there at the top right with the helping hand. She traveled to Beijing, China. She helped with the women's rights issue there, the right to birth as many children as you want, and there are other various oppressions. She taught self-help workshop to many women across the globe that attended, and many women were there across the globe, including Hillary Rodham Clinton at the time. My big mama pictured there at the bottom right, she went to March for Jobs for Justice in August 1963 during Dr. Martin Luther King. She got on a bus from Lafayette, Indiana. A few weeks before her firstborn granddaughter, that being me, would be born. I said, how dare you, go fight for civil and human rights when your first grandchild was about to be born. But that's how dire she saw moving justice and rights. And my father, he was a Lafayette Black Panther. He also went to the Black Political Convention in Gary through the leadership of Mayor Hatchard at that time. My great-grandmother housed Pullman porters. And so I come from a long stock of women of African descent, people of African descent that have been looking for a just transition. I myself marched in the first Women's March. I spoke at the United Nations for Women in New York on gender and women and climate justice. And I attended the Conference of Parties 21 in Paris, France, where there was over 15,000 of us marching in the streets and learning global stories around the impacts of environmental injustices, such as Palestinian women who are not allowed to learn how to drive or to swim. And so when there is flooding, their mortality is greater. Now I'd like to just try to turn on, hopefully our sound and everything will be cooperating, a video called In the Air, work sample excerpt by John Fiji. Can you see that? Can you see it?
It looks like we're just seeing the presentation. I'm wondering if the link pulled up on a different tab for you.
What is it that we're supposed to be saying? Yeah.
Okay.
Denise, you want me to pull it up?
Let me see. I think I found it in the other tab. So thank you for your coaching here. Appreciate it.
There we go.
And now let's just hope the sound is going to work. So let me know, please. Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great.
The city of Baytown is made of old money, lower to middle class families and pollution. But if you get a job at a chemical plant, you don't have time to think of a solution. I guess my brother, my uncle, and my cousins are sellouts because they went industrial instead of the drug route. Refinery city lights and pipes run along the Gulf Coast. The smoke boasts with sulfur air. It's a wonder anyone's able to take a breath. We're so used to it, we forget. Soon, the sons and daughters won't be able to drink the water. They say the first priority is the people, but the people are the ones being excluded and uprooted. Just ask Archer Courts, ask George Washington Carver Elementary, or ask the Suburbanites, Exxon Sacrifice, AKA Brownwood Neighborhood. God bless social media, but Flint ain't the only case of complexion without protection. Baytown, AKA the Dirty Bay, is surrounded by giant toxins, threatening the city in every way. We see the huge still from our window sills, make jokes as we choke. We've been possibly dying from this kind of poison oak. It's no mystery that the Black and brown communities are being targeted. Black lives matter, but not when they're expendable and making money is good for the market. Give them a fine, it's fine. They can afford it. We live with the headaches, the shortness of breath, and watery eyes. They keep building, and we pay for it. Constantly trying to heal ourselves and repel the environmental destruction. Breathe it in, then breathe out.
I share that ideally because we have communities that are indicative of environmental injustice across our nation, and including in the state of Indiana. And these are groups that are in search of a just transition. Let me put this back up here. And so continuing in the frame of the just transition and of African descendants, the transatlantic slave trade, where many people of African descent here in America embarked from either the central continent of Africa or the west portion of the continent of Africa, were put onto the bottom of these slave ships one by one in very foul, incomprehensible conditions, being moved through the Middle Passage, arriving to the shores of this country, and being the enslaved economic engine, providing free labor that built much of the United States. This group of African descendants, which I belong to, then had to endure the impacts of Jim Crow, with segregated schooling systems that were not invested in, and then moving into redlining, which impacts our housing and our businesses even still today. And then experiencing currently James Crow, which the brother of Jim's Crow, as it relates to mass incarceration of Black and brown bodies. So much so that folks are calculating our children from 3rd grade to go to the school to prison pipeline. Many of our communities are over-policed. Our educational systems are not invested in. They're under-resourced. Many of our communities are in blighted conditions, dilapidated housing in need of energy efficiency, weatherization, lead abatement. Many Black African-American unemployment is double whatever it is in white America. Folks are unemployed, underemployed, and unemployed. Some people just stop looking for work altogether. And then, of course, we make up the great proportion of essential workers, that being people like bus drivers who are inhaling the diesel fumes. And these are the folks that are most disproportionately impacted by the impacts of this pandemic, COVID-19. These are the same communities that are hosting polluting systems such as fossil fuel and live in close proximity to the highway emissions with vehicle diesel emissions spewing and impacting their air. And these are also the same communities that are disproportionately impacted by the impacts of climate. And so keeping with the theme somewhat too of myself being a woman, this being the Women for Change, just want to lift up women such as Harriet Tubman, who fought for the continuum freedom of her people to have a just transition, saying you'll be free or you'll die. She herself was an activist in the struggle for the women's suffrage. She was a constellationist, evidently, because she knew how to locate the North Star. And she was an environmental justice advocate because she understood the woods, she understood the marshes, the marsh regions, and she knew that moss grew on the north side of a tree in order to get her people to freedom. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention she's a Black woman freedom fighter who should be on the $20 bill. So again, we talk about this just transition. I want to touch on this framework very quickly, which really talks about and was created by the Our Power campaign and movement generation. NAACP was a participant in shaping this frame. And the gist of really this frame is, hey, we want to stop all the bad, everything that takes from our communities and from our economy. And we want to build a new economy, a more living economy, basically a more inclusive and caring type of economy. This frame is used by many, many environmental justice communities right now. And so we want to stop the bad and bring in the new, shift economic control to communities, democratize the wealth in the workplace, advance ecological restoration, drive racial justice and social equity, relocalize most production and consumption, and retain and restore cultures and traditions, and so much more. And so just to try to capture this just transition framework, I'd like to share another quick video, if it's going to be possible. Let's see. Apologies. Let's see.
Denise, I can share my screen. I have the video up.
You have the second one up?
Yeah.
Okay, if you would, please. Thanks. We're not hearing the sound, and if you want to make it bigger.
Overwarming is real.
Fires have been fueled by a high rate of asthma stated by Katrina.
Sure to follow, and now they are.
Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook.
The thing about hip-hop today is it's smart, it's insightful.
Let hip-hop lead the way to a great future.
We can see a much deeper economic downturn. Overwarming is real.
Fires have been fueled by a high rate of asthma stated by Katrina.
Were sure to follow, and now they are.
Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment.
Make the track sound good. And do that, got a message for the hood. It's time to go green. You gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream. Dr. King, we living your dream. My president is black, but he's on green. My president is black, but he's on green. I said my president is black, but he's on green. I got my president back. Now we do the same thing. Why your little cousin got asthma? Auntie got cancer. I know you know the problem, but you never knew the answer. You want the answer? Listen to my stanza. When it come to cold, they be stripping like a dancer. Who the company and who the boss like Tony Dancer? Maybe one day we probably get a chance to have a conversation about conservation. He'd rather condemnation, full compensation. Look, I'm from the hood. We need better food and better air. You probably wouldn't never care. You ain't never there. Rappers never rap about it. They rather act hard while these companies doing toxic in my backyard. I'm from the hood. The refinery ain't that far. Something like my neighbor ain't doing me no favors. We need more classes, not more sales. Man, we need green jobs. We don't need no jails. I said it's time to go green. You gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream. Dr. King, we living your dream. My president is black, but he's on green. So my president is black, but he's on green. I said my president is black, but he's on green. I got my president back. Now I do the same thing. The people that most need work with the work that most need done. We need funds. We can harness the sun. We can harness the wind. We can create jobs for my family and friends. Now when I say I'm going green to the hood, it sounds funny, but I'm talking about saving the earth and getting money. I'm talking about hundreds, thousands of M's. Do that go pull up in a hybrid on rims. So when I hit the block, y'all, the song gon' knock y'all. Car on E, but the car won't stop y'all. It's electric, so it's guaranteed to shock y'all. Yeah, I'm going green and I'm straight from the block, y'all. Want the green Bentley, I ain't talking about the paint. I'm talking about the one with biofuel in the tank. So many leaders paved the way for the leaders of today. These are shoulders that we stand on. Now we all hands on.
America can create millions of well-paid, green-collar jobs. We can make our streets safer and our communities healthier. We can save the planet for our children and our children's children. That is the promise of a green economy.
It's time to go green. We gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream.
Dr. King, we live in your dream. My president is black, but he's on green. So my president is black, but he's on green. I said my president is black, but he's on green. I got my president back, and I'm gonna do the same thing.
And we will put Americans to work, making our homes and buildings more efficient so that we can save millions of dollars on our energy bills. We need to ultimately make clean, renewable energy the profitable kind of energy. Develop technologies like wind power, solar power, advanced biofuel, and more efficient cars and trucks built right here in America.
Thank you, Haley. So that is just an example, again, of the just transition that many low-income communities of color are seeking and searching for. And I am so sorry for the technological challenges. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the NAACP, we constantly are working against environmental injustices, including climate change, that are having these disproportionate impacts on communities of color and low income in the United States and around the world. The NAACP program was created to provide resources and support to our community leadership in addressing this human and civil rights issue and for advocating for these objectives. So we have 3 objectives, which is 1, reduce harmful emissions, particularly greenhouse gases. We combine action on shutting down coal plants, other toxic facilities at the local level, as well as building on building to fight against new toxic facilities. With the advocacy to strengthen the development, to monitor these facilities, and to work work for good regulation that helps protect our communities at the federal, state, and local level. And so before masks were seemingly required, we had basically hashtag We Can't Breathe. This was a visual advocacy on the Indianapolis Power and Light that was burning coal at that time. We involve youth to include their art in their activism. We work to advance energy efficiency and clean energy. We work at the state level on campaigns to pass renewable energy and energy efficiency standards, while simultaneously working at the local level with small businesses, unions, and others, developing demonstration projects to ensure that communities of color are accessing the revenue generation opportunities in the new energy economy, while providing safer, more sustainable mechanisms for managing energy needs for our communities and beyond. Here pictured is my son, when he was smaller, doing our Journey for Justice for Energy Democracy Now. And to the right are members of the NAACP from Gary and Indianapolis that were instrumental in advocating and opposing that House Bill 1320, which Catherine already pretty much mentioned. It sought to have a narrative that pretty much said that distributed generation was not going to be positive for Blacks, people of color, and they wanted to charge a fee for sending clean energy across the grid. They even went and got resolutions from other national groups. And we said we are the Indiana NAACP, and we believe that clean energy is favorable for our communities, and we don't think that there should be a fee. And that resolution or that legislation was defeated at that particular time. We work to strengthen community resilience and livability. Once again, more family. That's my brother. He's a star fisherman. He loves the fish. He lives in Lafayette, Indiana, and I dare not tell him that the fish that he's catching probably have mercury and other pollutants. But we really advocate, support our members and their self-determination to advance food justice, to advocate for transportation equity, and to uphold civil and human rights and emergency management, and to facilitate participatory democracy. And many of our members are shaping and moving climate action planning throughout the state of Indiana and beyond. Also here in Indiana, in part of climate resiliency, or one's resiliency to bad things and wanting to bring in the good, we supported Our Youth Scientists program to East Chicago, where the children and the families were being impacted by 91,000 parts per million of lead and arsenic poisoning. Mr. Coleman, the science guy at the Urban Enterprise, who's no longer with us, he dressed up for that, which was very impressive. We taught the children how to test their own water, their own soil, and their air, and they were the ones that collected the data, and they shared it with the academia that we partnered with, and they presented their own findings. And we pretty much just call this community science, or our youth science, and we encourage our members and obviously others to do as many youth scientist components as you can. So now touching just a little bit about environmental justice in general, there were environmental justice principles that were shaped by the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in 1991. And there 17 different principles were shaped. And basically it was to secure our political and economic and cultural liberation that has been denied for over 500 years of colonialization, oppression, resulting in the poisoning of communities and land and genocide of our peoples, and to do, affirm, and adopt these environmental justice principles. So these are basically the foundation if one wants to have, you know, more information on environmental justice. If you want to fully understand it, then you want to ground yourself in these 17 different principles that, you know, everything from opposing nuclear testing and extraction of production and disposal of toxic hazards, and to affirm or to demand that the cessation of production of toxins and hazardous waste and radioactive materials and all that are past and current producers held strictly accountable to the people that they have impacted. And then that laid the foundation for what's known as Environmental Justice, or Executive Order 12898 that President Bill Clinton signed and moved in 1994. And this was an executive order that was to address environmental justice in minority populations and low-income populations. And it said that it shall make achieving environmental justice part of its mission by identifying and addressing as appropriate the disproportionately high and adverse health, human and health or environmental effects of its programs, policies, and activities on minority populations and low income in the throughout the United States, the District, Puerto Rico, Commonwealth. And so this, we kind of called out this executive order in Indianapolis with Site 0153, which requires that public officials have meaningful engagement with a community that is identified as an environmental justice community, which means they have to slow down any processes and make sure that communities engage and community is a part of whatever is going to happen, whether a site become a Superfund site or whether it get cleaned up or whatever happens, that the community is keenly involved. Also, it's very important to know about the Jamez principles, and these Jamez principles were created in 1996 by 40 people of color and European American representatives. They met in Jamez, New Mexico as a working group. And these Jamez principles are talking about being inclusive when you work with community, and that you make sure that the work is bottom-up organizing, that you let the community that's being impacted speak for themselves, that we work together in solidarity and mutuality, and that we build just relationships among ourselves. And then the sixth one is to commitment to self-transformation as we change society, operating from a mode of individualism to being community-centered. So this is how environmental climate justice, environmental justice, those are like the foundations on how to even begin to become a part of that kind of body of work, is being grounded in those documents I just mentioned. And then real quickly, so we have our Gary branch that's working on climate action planning, and this is led by Lori Latham and Latanya Troutman of Michigan City. Both are environmental climate justice chairs for the NAACP, and they are working to shape climate resiliency for their community. We've had members such as attorney James Brandon Williams, who's a next gen in the NAACP, calling for energy justice, community solar, and clean energy. And even other members physically challenged, holding signs saying stop the climate crisis, economic violence, and inequity and injustice. We have Akeisha Daniels from East Chicago, Indiana, who is a survivor of the West Calumet lead and arsenic, speaking out at a forum to advocate for a better way of living in her community. We've done the This Is Us campaign, which we're still doing in Indiana, calling for energy justice, community solar, rooftop solar, calling for energy efficiency. We have members of the Indianapolis NAACP branch, Gary Holland and Elizabeth Gore, that have been advocating for clean water and lead-free at the schools here in Indianapolis, and Ms. Gore fighting for Martindale Brightwood to have the lead remediated out of the soil there. We have the president of Greater Lafayette NAACP calling for equity in a climate action plan. We have the Indiana State Conference that is called for mandatory energy efficiency. We had a Senate Bill 412 that basically said that the industrials no longer had to pay into a system that would help ramp up energy efficiency. There was a program called Energizing Indiana that became obliterated, and the NAACP said that there should be mandatory energy efficiency policies and that there should be contributions such as making housing more efficient. We should be building new houses, requiring builders to have to build them energy efficient. We've been a part of the Indiana State Conference through the leadership of President Bowling Williams, where we provided testimony at the 21st Century Energy Policy Task Force, and where we had a roundtable with the governor to discuss how environmental justice should be one of the experts on the on the 21st Century Policy Task Force. We weren't successful in getting an environmental justice representative per se, but we were instrumental in being able to share our information with the experts to let them know about the environmental justice lens. And we hope to continue so that they will make a 21st century energy policy that will include all Hoosiers and will move all of Indiana to the next level. The Indiana State Conference also shared all of the game changers of the NAACP, which is everything from education to criminal justice and so forth. And then that's where we also called for the Environmental Justice Task Force. And then I have to show Madam Walker, who was there shining light on us, another stark woman, Black woman activist of her time in the governor's office. You know, we work for collective system change. We tell our narrative, we tell our story as we see it. We amplify starkly lifting the EJ narrative across Indiana, and we have done so for many, many years now. We give a frame about the inclusion of community and minority business enterprises relating to this green economic just transition to make sure that we get the jobs as it relates to this climate resiliency planning, that we get the jobs as it relates to the solar that's being developed, that we get the jobs when it comes to cleaning up the hazards in our communities. We partner with academia to help us to do research because in Indiana, it's hard to find research on where these impacts are. So we have worked with students to do internships with us before. We're a proponent for protecting our health. We've ramped up education around green economic job training. In fact, we have 2 solar projects that we're doing right now. We're adding what we call a power up component where we'll be training people 18 to 25, anyone that's a returning citizen from being incarcerated, anyone that is underemployed or unemployed that signs up, will be providing a job training opportunity and ideally get them placed. We advocate on where energy is going to be developed. We want our children to be able to see that energy. We want them to benefit from the energy. We want it on our rooftops. We want it on our apartments. We prefer community-owned solar. We want community-owned solar policies and legislations in Indiana and beyond. I touched on the youth empowerment piece and doing community science, letting community science be a part of any kind of decisions because they're the ones living within whatever is impacting them. So we've had an impact at the federal, state, and local legislative level. We've spoken with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. We took surveys of our community around the high disconnects in Indiana on our electric utility bills and other utilities. So we advocate for climate, water, air. We oppose incinerators, waste incinerators that are polluting communities. We advocate for food access, cleaning up of brownfields, energy, housing, economics, criminal justice, where you don't want to have our the folks that are incarcerated living in dire conditions, such as the Indiana Women's Prison. We don't want them being used for disaster labor or cheap labor. We want to advocate for their getting trained for when they come out, maybe into the clean energy jobs. Our schools having environmental justice within the school system. The children should be starting to learn the legacy of where they live early so that they can be advocates early. Transportation equity, recycling equity, and much more. Oh, sorry, 1 second. So what can you do? There's many, many things, but one, of course, you can join your local NAACP. A lot of our NAACP branches have environmental climate justice committees, but some do not. So you could help to start one, or you can join an existing committee. You could support community-led organizing. You could vote for or help to identify those political leaders and candidates that are environmental and climate justice believers and or champions. Soon we'll be putting out our own scorecard on who has been doing well in that area and who has not. You can call your legislators and organize a meeting and discuss the need for the following: local and state climate action tables, and advocate for equity, which equitable, when you reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, where are they being reduced at? Can we make sure that everyone will benefit from those reductions and their co-pollutants? And will there be an equitable adaptation plan that includes everyone? Local and state just transition table that doesn't just say that coal miners should get a just transition, but how about those communities that have been hosting power plants? Or how about Black folks that pay $49 billion into the energy sector, but only hold 1.1% of the energy jobs? Should they not get a just transition into the new green economy? You can advocate for local and state clean air ordinances, better net metering legislation, affordable and accessible clean energy for all, better energy efficiency legislation, call for mandatory 2% per year, better renewable portfolio standards, call for mandatory 25% renewable energy by 2025. We can advocate for better water, food, access, housing, building codes, and more. And very importantly, adhere to the Hermes principles. And quoting Angela Davis, Black women have had to develop a larger vision for our society than perhaps any other group. They have had to understand white men, white women, and Black men, and they have had to understand themselves. When Black women win victories, it is a boost for virtually every segment of our society. And lastly, Dr. Martin Luther King, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, that was quite an array of things we could possibly do, I have to say. But yes, we are open for questions now. I have one question, because this has really given us a very different lens on the issue of environmental justice, and mostly the other side, which is the injustice sometimes that can happen. But in terms of changing the system that perpetuates these divisions and differences, what is the NAACP doing to be more inclusive and integrative of the larger movement? I mean, how are you connecting to the larger movement? In Indiana, focusing on Indiana. I know you met with the governor, but I sense two parallel tracks here. Am I not reading it correctly?
Well, I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but what we are doing as the Indiana NAACP is basically engaging our members. Educating is a big component, right? Because there's a lot of technological language. There's a lot of bridging the gap that has to occur. So first we have to give our members information and tools on what they can do to make a change in their community. So we provide them with a lot of training. Then secondly, we support their power. So whatever it is that the local branches want to do, we provide them technical assistance to support their own power and whatever it is that they want to move. And then lastly, we help to advocate for policy. So we will share with our members the various policies such as community-owned solar, or inclusive on-bill financing. Last year, we helped to defeat House Bill 1414, and our members came to the State House and they gave their voice. We've given our voice into the 21st Century Energy Policy Task Force, and anyone that wants to align with the members that are most impacted, the frontline communities who's within that HMES principles, whose voices should be heard, bottom-up organizing is welcome to come along and provide their expertise and their support so that those that are most impacted can shape their communities and how they want them to be.
I guess my question wasn't as clear as I thought it was, but it seems to me that you feel it's absolutely essential to have a separate movement around this issue, because the problems that minorities and people of color and poor people have are not being addressed in the larger movement. That's kind of what I was hearing.
I'm not sure where that's, because we're obviously very much a part of the movement. I've been to, as I mentioned, like the COP21 with over 15,000 people moving at the Conference of Party 21 again, in opposition to the United States not being a part of the Paris Agreement, calling for 1.5 degrees Celsius as opposed to 2 degrees Celsius. Which is, so we're a part of many different movements, and we don't dictate to our members on what other coalitions that they can be a part of, but they can't lose sight of their own agendas either, and their own needs and their own policies.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hearing.
So
I'm ready. Haley, you ready for?
We have a couple questions in the chat. Linda asks, has there been any success in serving on or presenting to local and state utility regulatory commissions?
Any success on serving on the utility?
Or presenting to local and state utility regulatory commissions?
Oh, yeah. We have the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission called on us, the NAACP, to provide surveys to communities around the high number of disconnects. Their solution, the utility solution at the time, was to do like rate bill design. We basically pushed back that we didn't think that redesigning the bill would help people in paying their utilities, and then we did offer in that space different type of financing mechanisms and different things that would be beneficial to communities. We have spoken into the integrated resource planning of utilities and presented our various frames on what our communities needed. We have participated in many of the processes with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission.
Great. We have
including providing testimony, comments, attending public hearings with the Office of Utility Consumer. Yes.
Great. Another question, how are you able to make progress in an environment where the federal government denies a need for climate change? This person also noted that they're discontinuing the Prius cars, which is quite sad.
They're discontinuing the Prius?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, basically, a lot of what I shared, you know, communities have their own self-determination, and people know that they're suffering, whether it's like urban heat islands and it's extremely hot and they don't have air conditioning, or people know that they don't have access to quality food, or that they don't have access to food at all. And so we are teaching and helping and moving alongside collectively with our members to teach them how you build an urban garden. How can we get you resources so that you can create a community urban garden or a cooperative within your community? How can you obtain solar? So we're building solar within our community churches so that they can save or other organizations, non-for-profit, faith-based, how they can reduce their energy costs, and then they can better serve their mission in giving back to the communities that they serve within environmental justice communities. So also making sure that equity is first and foremost in climate action planning. Right now, the Evansville NAACP, we learned that there was climate action planning that has been taking place. Nowhere really was equity indicated. Nowhere was there really any outreach to informed communities of color. And so now they're going to be having a whole forum on equity in the climate action planning in Evansville to try to inform that process, make sure that it's community driven, and that community knows a lot. They are the best knowers of their community and what they need to be resilient. And so we're helping to support those voices into that plan, which will make that plan much better for the betterment of everyone in that city.
Thanks, Denise. Another question, would you consider collaborating with the Hoosier Environmental Council, Earth Charter Indiana, Indiana Recycling Coalition, Friends of White River, and then also if you'd been involved with Janet McCabe of IU?
Well, Janet McCabe is instrumental in me being here speaking to Women for Change, and we've invited Janet to speak to us at the NAACP, and we're open to having conversations and collaborations with any and all persons and organizations. Thus, we're here even with Women for Change. I'm not really acquainted to Women for Change. So it's about sharing the frame, coming with authentic partners, authentic collaborators that want to move justly and respectfully of other people's vision and theory of change. We have a theory of change that centers frontline communities and people of color who are most impacted by these climate decisions, by these energy decisions. And so that is who we take our lead from on the work that we do.
Thanks, Denise. I also invite anyone else to ask a question to the chat feature, or also if now you'd like to unmute your mic and ask a question, you can also do that.
I'd also add, with Earth Charter, I served on the board of Earth Charter. I really want to give homage to John Gibson, who recently passed, who I cared about a lot. I've been given the Earth Charter Award at some point in time when I came back from COP21. Same with Hoosier Environmental Council. I respect
Did we lose? Hello?
She froze.
Sharon, did you have a question? Or was Denise frozen?
I have a comment. I don't know if Denise can hear me or not, but one of the things that I find most important for me to learn and change the way I think and be open-minded about is the theory of change. And so I'm very interested to look up these Hermes principles. They sound like they sound like everything our daughter talks about all the time, and she is a social change agent and with racism. And the part about having the people who are most affected be the ones who decide what should happen, instead of the sort of paternalistic, oh, I can come in and see what you need kind of approach, which has been the norm for many models. Lots of models, and still is the norm, that an expert should decide what should happen. And I just am very inspired by it. And I'm going to be looking up those.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was disconnected for my internet cut off, so.
We're glad you're back. We saw you frozen, but you're no longer frozen. I have to say, I'm going to look up, as Sharon was just sharing, that she's going to be looking up some information about the Hermes principles and the theory of change so that we're better informed about this. And I guess I'm going to struggle a little bit more with my need. It is my need and also my philosophy about bridging things together. And there's something about this work that to me needs more bridging, I guess. I think everyone's out there advocating and doing great things, but is there a place where people, I don't know, I'm not clear. I just don't know if we're working together to make our climate safe and enduring for a little bit longer. And I think it's very apparent that what you are doing is absolutely needed, because every single major issue that we seem to be facing these days is laced with the toxic mixture of racism. It's so divisive in everything we do. And so a lot of the things that we do are divided by race. And I guess my concern is that, is there a way we can make sure that we are also working together toward common goals, even though there has to be advocacy for particular groups and their needs, their special needs? You don't have to answer that. It's an adaptive question, but I just wanted to say it out loud.
Well, we work on with other groups at various tables, and then certainly on the national level. I've been a part of many different groups where we create a shared understanding on everything, because you may say equity, and equity to you may mean this, but it may mean that for me. So we go through a whole intentional process on what is our collective or shared understanding on what equity is. The same was done on just transition. Some groups were very, especially a lot of labor groups, were very keen on that a just transition was strictly the coal miners, and the coal workers needed to have a just transition if they lose their jobs as we move into clean energy. But environmental justice groups said, hey, there needs to be a just transition for indigenous people that are at the extraction point of fracking. There needs to be a just transition for those people drinking polluted water in Pines, Indiana, that have been drinking the dumping of coal ash. There needs to be a just transition for the communities of Michigan City that are hosting the pollution, and their property values are lower by 15%. Children's, people's asthma and breathing. And so there was an infusion on what is the understanding of a just transition. Is it inclusive of communities, or is it just, so there has to be, in my view, and especially my experience in Indiana, a lot more conversations and a lot more intentionality, and not be a extractive that we talked about, extracting from people. It cannot be a transactional. We need to build real, authentic relationships where we truly are trying to understand other people's perspectives and what other people need and want for their communities, and that there isn't just one definition, that we all have. We come from different places, and so we need to create a shared understanding and a shared theory of how we want to change Indiana, a shared theory of change.
Well, that gives me a lot more hope.
Yeah. Denise, how do we start? Is it educating people? I know that I've read by the Nobel Prize winning economists, that they say the two biggest factors, in upheaval coming, to us is income inequality and, the environment, climate change. And I don't even know where to start trying to educate people. I feel like we've got to do that somehow. It's gotten political, and there's, half of the folks who just don't even believe in science anymore. And I was just wondering, where would you say to start doing this, you know, in our communities and everything, you know, and teaching and.
Well, I'm not going to presume to be the expert on what the first steps are, but I do know that it starts with dialogue. So if there's a group that's already organized in a local community and they're already having conversations and they've already started making positive change, it might be becoming a part of that process and then infusing what you bring, and that we believe that everyone brings value to every single conversation. What we ask in then you can create like a visioning strategy session where you hear everyone talk about what all is challenging in our community. You can use Post-it notes or what have you. What all do we want to see change? What all is possible? And how do we stop this bad in our communities? And that kind of informs the strategy and who all can then help us to make this change. You know, the governmental entities, the academia, who all, and then basically probably have someone maybe help to even do academia, do a report and research on those various aspects that the community has decided that it wants to change and that is the most important aspect to them. There's another thing around that, you know, although we may fix the climate, some say that equity and justice is not inevitable. And as long as we're looking at these broken systems, why don't we create a more equitable and just systems? And that the inequity in these systems is what has gotten us into the problem that we're in anyway. So let's include equity. Some people believe when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, just reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And if someone's still hosting that pollution, oh well. Environmental justice communities are saying, no, we need to reduce it properly. We shouldn't use technological solutions like carbon capture sequester because they put that down in the ground. Some community has to host that. So let's get to the root cause of our problems. And we know that we are intuitive enough and innovative enough that we can create better systems, more in harmony with our ecosystem.
We have time for maybe one more question, but just to follow up on what Andrea was saying, if there were just one issue that is most urgent for Indiana to deal with, what would you say it is?
The way I would frame it would be an equitable climate action plan with the just transition.
Okay.
I should say an equitable just transition.
All right.
And Terry asks if you could, I know we only have a couple more minutes, but if you could explain more about your involvement with the defeat of House Bill 1320.
Our involvement was that, again, the legislators that decided they wanted to create legislation around distributed generation, and they wanted to charge a fee to send clean energy across the grid. And they used a narrative that said pretty specifically that African Americans, people of color, would be most unfairly impacted because the rates of electric energy would increase if we have to continue to base those more privileged who can afford clean energy to send the energy across the grid, which the basic premise is, yeah, if we don't get access to clean energy, then maybe that's a correct statement. But we decided that because we are the ones most direly impacted by climate, because we want to be the emerging market, those that can acquire clean energy, that this was an invalid statement that we debunked. And so we organized, we submitted an op-ed to the newspaper that debunked that theory, and we brought a few members across the state that were all lined up to testify. It was so crowded. Of course, other groups were very organized in their campaign. And the line of people to give testimony was so long that the people that we had travel from Gary were not able to give their testimony, which also created a whole nother thing. How can you not have these people that traveled all the way from Gary? Plus you're saying people of color, and here they are, people of color ready to testify to tell you that they are very much interested in clean energy. It was just really, really bad. And then there was a part in the testimony where one of the representatives said, I don't know why race is being brought up into this. And the other representative said, well, because your group brought it up as an issue, you said. And so the Indiana State Conference of the NAACP is here to say, no, we love clean energy. We want more clean energy. We want the jobs to come with it. We want the resilience to come with it. But they also got resolutions from national groups. I want to say definitely the Indiana Blacks in Energy wrote a resolution saying that wrote testimony or resolution or something saying that that there should be a fee, that clean energy wasn't going to be fair to communities of color. And also, I forgot another national group, big national group. And so I guess our position was very, very important as being here in the state and representing a large community group of people of color that was for it. So now we want to benefit from it. That's for sure.
Yes. Denise, this has been extremely informative, and I have to say provocative as well for me. I'm going to be doing a lot more reading and maybe even circling back to talk to you some more about what you're doing and the impact that it's having. And I hope that the rest of us will continue to have this conversation and ask the questions, because I think that's really what we have to do. And this has been extremely enlightening. We want to thank you for your time. And remember, we said we probably would have you and Janet back to do a joint conversation to move in the next direction. But the committee will be meeting on August the 12th. So everyone on this call will be hearing from us about what our next move will be and how we can continue to have this conversation with you joining us. So I want to thank you and everyone who joined us today, and especially you, Haley, for helping us navigate technologically. Everyone else have a safe life and stay well. And Terry, we welcome you back to Indiana next week. And the rest of you, and I think Kate, you're still in Michigan. Are you back?
I'm back.
Oh, great. Okay, good. So Indiana's is going to be in safe hands with you, two of you back. We'll be back. Thank you so much again, Denise.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Women for Change. Take care.
Bye-bye.